compliance of the e-waste sector by implementing monitoring and control mechanisms. So this is we call this conformity assessment scheme, which favor high standard operations and allow businesses to grow in a level playing field. We heard that many times also by the recycler. So the level playing field is key, that the business can grow. So the table of content. I will quick introduce you in the example of Switzerland, because I will explain you the standards about what I know best. It's the example of Switzerland, and EMPA has a role in this whole conformity assessment scheme in Switzerland. Then I will lead over to what are objectives of a conformity assessment scheme and the approaches. I will talk about a little bit in more detail about the technical regulations and standards. Then I will insert a little bit something about international standards. So what is out there, what can be copied actually, and I will lead over to some conclusions. So the example Switzerland. We have several take-back schemes. This one is called SENS, it's the oldest one. This is the Swiss Foundation for Waste Management. And they are handling mainly waste electrical appliances, such as small and large household appliances, fridges, etc. So white goods, and I think the other one is called brown goods, no? In other languages. The other one is Swico Recycling. That's the unit of the Swiss Association for the Information, Communication and Organizational Technologies, ICT. So it's kind of the ICT association. It came out of that, Swico Recycling, and handles mainly waste, ICT and consumer electronics, such as personal computers. So we actually have not competing schemes. There are two collective schemes in Switzerland, and they're concentrating on their appliances. And they were founded by the industry itself. So it's the choice of the industry in Switzerland how to handle e-waste. Then we have specialized schemes, but which attach themselves to the two big ones, SENS and Swico. SLRS is the Swiss Lightning Recycling Foundation, which handles exclusively lighting equipment, such as tube lights. And there is a scheme called InnoBat, and that's the lobby for battery disposal, handles exclusively all primary and secondary battery, such as those for mobile phones. So it's not an ARF system for financing, but a prescribed tax by the authorities. That's maybe the difference to all the other schemes. So we're not talking, ARF is the advanced recycling fee. Okay, the other team scheme and the role of EMPA. So the local authorities order disposal permits in Switzerland and check general legal compliance of the facility regularly, so approximately every 2 weeks. That's what the local authority has the task to do that with the recyclers. Huh? And the local authorities also carry out health and safety checks once in a while. So it's not just an auditing body, it's the local authorities. And now there comes in private organizations carry out audits for environmental health and safety management systems, so like ISO, etc. So also recycler, they also comply with ISO standards sometimes. And there's the control, and that's what I want to talk about. There's the technical control body of the take-back schemes, check recyclers regarding their accomplishment of reporting obligations and technical treatment requirement as specified in the contract with the take-back scheme. So the last point is actually what the take-back schemes and the industry put themselves. So this is not what the authority put, but they put themselves that they comply within their scheme with the legal requirements in Switzerland. And this technical control body, among others, is also EMPA involved in that. So actually, it's not me, but it's my colleagues who are actually executing audits with Swiss recyclers, and also beyond, also third-party downstream processors. So also your facility is visited once in a while by EMPA and audited by us, the facility in Austria. So how does it work? You see that. So SENS, Swico Recycling and SLRS, they make contracts with certain recyclers. And these contracts, they are based on this is a very competitive process. They are based on a tender which goes out. So they make these contracts. And then, independent from these contracts, they contract a certain organization, the technical control body, on behalf of SENS, WICO and SLRS, and they go and check these recyclers. So actually, we have a system that they say, okay, it doesn't make sense, we have a control body, we have one, they joined and said, if somebody goes and checks this recycler, and this has a contract maybe with other ones also, so that we need just one check, so that not somebody is coming from SENS and WICO as well. So that's how it is, and it's independent, so we report back to them, of course, and we have a contract with that, but we are independent from the recyclers, we are independent from the take-back schemes. Huh? That's important to understand. It has to be set up like this in order to comply with general auditing rules. So EMPA has about 4 auditors, and there are like private specialists who are also hired. So for the size of Switzerland, we talk about 5 to 10 auditors, depending on when. I mean, it changes a little bit. So objectives and approach. The aim of the conformity assessment scheme. Conformity assessment is to assess whether a treatment operator adheres to the prescribed quality standards and the environmental aspects of this operation. So that means you need to have quality standards, of course. And to determine his performance against prescribed recycling and recovery quotas stipulated for the different WE categories. There is a functional approach behind the conformity assessment. A general, this is defined also again in an ISO standard somewhere. So first you need to demonstrate fulfillment of specific, or there is a need first to demonstrate fulfillment of specific requirements. You start with a selection process, which gives you information on selected items, and I will explain you in a little bit more detail later what that means. You continue with a determination process, which gives you information on fulfillment of specific requirements. And you continue with the review and attestation of your audit results, and gives you about fulfillment of specified requirements if you can demonstrate them. So if there is surveillance needed, this process starts again. So if they didn't comply with them, it will start again the process. If not, this is the end. But that doesn't mean the recycler is not audited again. It's probably every 2 years the recycler is audited again. So this comes into it. But if he doesn't comply, he needs to improve his quality, and he will be audited immediately again afterwards. So selection phase, this includes planning and preparation, so that's a desk work, activities in order to enable the subsequent determination phase. It is.
The car is for recycling or the others?
Pardon me?
Is that for recyclers?
That's for recyclers. Yeah. I'm just talking about setting standards and auditing the recyclers. No? So I will switch. This is more like the approach, the process behind the auditing. I will talk later a little bit about the standards itself, what they contain. So the assessment is planned and relevant documents are requested from the treatment operator. So we actually we call the recycler and say we need this and this, or prepare ourselves for this audit. And reported mass flows and batch results are verified. So actually the recycler also has a duty to document his operation. So we already get this data. And then we check this, because sometimes you cannot go there within 1 day and check every detail with a recycler. So you need to concentrate on certain things where you think there might be a problem, or maybe just on things which you haven't checked 2 years ago. It's also, we usually announce our visits, but we don't need to announce our visits. If we think one recycler sometimes doesn't comply, maybe we just go there, unannounced. But if we make this process, of course he knows that we are about to prepare ourselves to visit him. So the choice for the most adequate procedures for the determination phase is made. This might include the decision on specific measures or samples to be taken in the course of the determination phase. So sometimes we also take samples which go then to laboratory analysis. You can take air samples or soil samples, whatever. That could be part of it if there is a need for it. So the determination phase is equal to the on-site audit. I mean, it's a phrase used in this ISO standard, determination phase. But that's actually what we call on-site audit or inspection. This involves completing the information required to verify if specified requirements formulated in the technical guidelines are met. I think that's quite clear. And as I said already, visits are usually pre-announced, but it's possible that we make surprise visits. And then we have this review and attestation phase, so verification of all collected information in order to decide whether conformity is met or not. We do that in our office. The result of the conformity assessment is reported to the treatment operator in the form of a conformity assessment report. So that's the audit protocol, we call it. That has a format which is given by the technical control body which we developed ourselves together with the take-back schemes. And corrective measures are formulated in the conformity assessment report which the treatment operator has to fulfill and document in a given period of time. So now I'm switching over to the technical regulations and standards the recycler has to comply with, no? So there's the technical standards in the middle, and of course the influence for the technical standards is on one side legal requirements given by the legislation of the country. So it's usually these four areas. It's about waste, it's about air, it's about water and emergency. So emergency is health and safety issues and so on. There might be others playing into this. It's a selection of the four most important. Then this also includes environmental sustainability considerations, so pollution issues, which are partly, of course, covered by legal requirements or fully. Resource depletion issues, which might not be really covered by the legal requirements, but which might be a wish by the take-back schemes. And life cycle assessment issues, so to improve the effectivity of this whole system over the whole life cycle. And of course this scheme then gives empirical evidence about pollutant concentration and pollutant effect. So that allows a standard to sample and to measure against empirical evidence. And it has to be practicable. So about practicability about technological restrictions, about economical restrictions and controlling restrictions. I mean, it has to be, you have to implement it, it has to work. So if you put something which is just not implementable, it doesn't make sense either. So I introduce you a little bit in these technical regulation standards we use with SWICO and SENS. So I think this is more or less compatible with other standards, which I briefly will talk about later, about international standards. Sorry, I just lost this one. So the purpose of this standard, the standards shall lay down measures to protect the environment and human health. I think that's quite clear. Shall contribute towards closing material cycles. Maybe that's not so clear, but we heard a lot about it. We actually talk about resource policies and not just waste policies. I think that's what it wants to cover. And stipulate the processing requirements and special obligations of the recycling companies. The scope The standards are valid for all waste electrical and electronic appliances as well as their components. They are valid for the entire collection and treatment chain, so including really starting with the collection. And they are valid for appliances insofar as they still contain cables, electronic components and other hazardous components. So that opens a little bit the scope, of course. Then I switch over to the basic principles. They have to comply with the relevant federal, cantonal and municipal regulations. So these are contains company-specific assessment of all legal requirements will be included. So a recycling company, of course, also has to deal with the authorities. And if we see, like in a standard protocol, that they comply with the rules of the authorities and were audited by the authorities already, we would not go through this step again. So that's a kind of a principle. It also principle is the destroy data carriers. This is always a topic, I think. Processes must focus on optimum recovery of scrap and the concentration of hazardous substances. Concentration of hazardous substances means you have depollute the appliances and you have to concentrate it on more or less on a pile. You have to collect it together so that they cannot distribute it somewhere. The staff must be trained so that they can identify hazardous compounds. So somebody opening the computer, you did this training, that you see immediately what's in there, what is hazardous, what is not. E-waste may not be processed mechanically with scrap metal or other waste. So that means if you have a metal shredder just letting through metals coming from a car or so, you should not use that for e-waste. Together with the other, of course. Hazardous waste may not be distributed over the fractions if this primarily serves to reduce the hazardous waste content of the output fractions. That's actually why Switzerland was in this still quite tough on plastics containing brominated flame retardants, because the easiest way to get rid of the brominated flame retardant is to mix it with other plastics not containing so much. So actually this is mixing contaminated with non-contaminated. I know this has been done quite widely in Europe, but actually by law, at least in Switzerland, this is forbidden. I think it's forbidden in many countries, but I think many don't really comply to this. All combustible fractions which cannot be recovered are subject to the incineration duty and must be burned in suitable plants. Of course, this is also, we assume that we have those plants, of course, so that's a problem if you don't have any incineration plants in a country. All non-recyclables and non-combustible fractions must be prepared so that they meet the landfill requirements. In Switzerland, we have a landfill ban, actually. We don't landfill normal waste. We only have certain very specific landfill for such fractions, like slags from incineration and so on. Asbestos, yeah. So there are documentation and reporting duties. The recycling company must have an organization chart which clearly shows the responsibilities of persons. The recycling company must document the internal controls measure for improving the disposal standards. I mean, this is very typical, also ISO standards. If you're another company, not recycling in a production company, that's the usual procedure. Written instructions. And the recycling company commits to keeping account of materials using the recording and analysis software. Well, this is now specific for Switzerland because the take-back schemes provide them a tool where they can have material accounting. Now, this material accounting is quite important because that serves to actually track the effectivity or the performance of the system in Switzerland. So that's why Swiss recyclers have to do this. Some of you know Esther Müller, my colleague. She is actually in charge of this material accounting for the Swiss take-back scheme. She does that job. The recycling company commits to requiring proof of material flow, which is part of that, from the recipient for fraction produced through external processing. So this actually means we need to know proof of what's getting into the plant, what's getting out of the plant. So this also has something to do with the take-back schemes paying the recycler per kilogram or per ton. They need to know that they don't cheat there. So there must be a system behind that this can be a proof. The quality of depollution is monitored and checked through key figures from the materials accounting, internal calculated key figures, and in the event of mechanical processing through chemical analysis. We heard from Robert that in his UK facility he does sometimes, he sends a worker for blood measurement, or maybe he does some air measurement himself. So that's actually what that means. If one or more reference values are exceeded in a representative examination, suitable measures must be taken immediately to reach the reference values. And then we have, and I will not go into details with that, we have a whole bunch of depollution requirements, because these are the importance, how that should be done. Like that your competitors containing hazardous substance must be removed from the appliances. So this goes into details, how it should be done. So I'm not going into details, you can read it in your documents. Then there are some recovery requirements. It must be in accordance with the WE directive. The recycling company is obliged to reach recycling and recovery quotas. I told you yesterday, I think, that in Switzerland we don't really have recycling and recovery quotas. But Switzerland is not part of the European Union, but still we have always pressure, and it also makes our life easier when we comply with the rules given with all the surrounding countries, because still, I mean, we cannot be totally independent. So that's why this is in there too. Proof of compliance with the minimum recycling and recovery quotas is provided by means of batch tests. That's also something Empamach does. So we go once in a while, we go to a recycler and do some batch tests. So that means we actually look what's getting in and what they really get out. And this gives us a measure of how effective the technology the recycler uses is, and if they meet the recycling quotas, recovery quotas. Okay, about international standards. There's a movement that I mean, Europe developed now since some years. There were countries with a private system, let's call competitive system, and then there were countries with collective system. The collective systems like Sens and Swico, they joined each other in an organization called European WE Forum, and they started a process some year ago to harmonize the standards used in these collective systems, and that's the WE Labex. So the adoption of the pan-European WE Labex standard by the WE Forum General Assembly that was adopted in 2011 will result in a new conformity assessment scheme for the participating collective take-back schemes. So also for us in Switzerland, this will actually mean we have to be accredited by these WE Labex standards as an auditing body, so that we can do the audits in Switzerland for the recyclers. If we are that, we actually could also be hired by another country to do the auditing. So the introduction of the standard is foreseen for 2013 for those schemes which form part of the group of first movers. I actually don't know really who is in there. I don't have the details on that, but it's a stepwise approach, I think, how they introduce these standards in Europe. By US EPA, it's a voluntary standard created by the industry trade groups. And it has been criticized, for example, and I just it's a good standard, but I mentioned these 2 points because I will switch over to the next standards, and especially from that area this was criticized for not banning export of WE or components of WE to developing countries, and it was also criticized that it does not fix clear work and health and safety requirements. And it especially came from that side. I mean, you know Basel Action Network, Jim Packett, they developed then their own standard because they were not satisfied by the R2. It's called the E-Stewards. So the standard is on end-of-life management of WE. In comparison also to the WLABEX, it requires full ISO 14000, that's environmental management standards, occupational health and safety requirements, and adherence to the Basel Convention and OECD trade rules. It's the conformance verification with the standard is following a third-party conformity assessment approach, and auditors need to be qualified environmental management system auditors and need further qualification by the BAN designated training provider. So that's more or less their system. R2 is, I think, only US, and actually East Europe is spreading slowly into an international recognized standard. So also R2 too? R2 too? But is there any non-US recycler R2 certified yet? I haven't heard about.
There are a couple who I know right now are actually looking at.
Okay.
Even a couple of step members who are looking at R2 certification.
Okay.
Retailers
Good.
in Canada also have R2 certification.
Retailers?
Yeah, Best Buy.
Okay, good. I want to mention this one too. It's not really a typical recycling standard, but it has a part of it. It's actually a product standard. Producers can tell more about that than me. So it's the EPEAT standard, Electronic Product Environmental Assessment Tool. It's called, is a product standard for electronics. It's operated by the Green Electronic Council and started in 2005. It's slowly spreading. It was also started in the US. This is not actually quite well spreading now throughout the world. So it's widely recognized and accepted with over 2,200 products that are already EPEAT certified. You see, actually the big producers of IT material, they mostly have EPEAT standards now, no? The future trends go towards standardized technical requirements and harmonized audit procedures in Europe. So it started national-wise, or maybe or even just organization-wise, and now it's spreading with this WLABEX, as we saw. On a global scale, different NGOs and governments have initiated the formulation and implementation of standards, so that they are also slowly spreading on a global level. The harmonization on a global scale, for example, the International Standard Organization or the OECD might become necessary in the near future in order to assure a global level playing field. That's maybe something, it's just my personal opinion. And this is also my personal opinion. There is a need to develop resource strategies for take-back schemes, conformity assessment systems, which address not only depollution, because that's the focus right now, from hazardous substances and the recovery of basic and precious metals, but also the recovery of critical metals. That's a new topic a little bit, critical metals, rare earth elements and so on, but I think that's probably the way the standards will develop. Okay, thank you very much. Open for questions.